A review of Always with Honor by Piotr Rangel by Matthew Pilgrim. Read by Ian Wilson. God is not on the side of might, but right. Piotr Rangel. The Russian Civil War was one of the most critical events of the 20th century. The Russian Empire had stood for centuries, disintegrated, and its people were thrust into a brutal existential fight between the Bolshevist Communist Red Army and the anti-Bolshevist White Army. The Russian Civil War resulted in around 10 million casualties, including both combatants and civilians, and led to the creation of the Soviet Union, a state that would rise to the status of global superpower that dominated world politics for nearly the entirety of its existence. There is no better book with which to study this incredibly tragic and fascinating conflict than the memoirs of the White Army General Piotr Rangel, Always with Honor. Baron General Piotr Rangel was a career military man who served his country with distinction in the Russian-Japanese War, the First World War, and the Russian Civil War. Rangel would eventually inherit the responsibility of leading all white forces in the latter stages of the conflict. Accepting the duty that fate had selected him for, Rangel made a titanic stand at the Crimean Peninsula until his forces were eventually overwhelmed. When disaster befell his cause, Rangel organized and successfully led the mass evacuation of the White Army and thousands of Russian civilians to seek refuge abroad from utterly brutal persecution at the hands of the Bolshevists. He dedicated the rest of his life working to assist white Russian emigres around the world and in organizing Russian opposition to the Soviet regime in the hopes that one day the Red tyranny would be overturned. Always with Honor is Rangel's account of the political transformation of Russia during the Revolution and his career in the White Army during the subsequent Civil War. However, it is important to state that this book will not only be of interest to those who enjoy reading historical material. In addition to being a historical record, Always with Honor offers a portrait of Rangel's personality and thus gives the reader insight into an admirable man, an inspirational leader, whose life was defined by selfless duty and unquestionable integrity of personal character, such a subject of immense value for any reader. It may be beneficial for some readers who are unfamiliar with this historical period to have a brief overview before the book is reviewed further, so that they may have a sense of the time and place that Rangel lived and writes about in his memoirs. The Russian Revolution and Civil War, like all major historical episodes, are incredibly complex and intricate. They involved a myriad of persons, factions, and concurrent historical events, but the following is the essential information. The revolution unfolded in two phases beginning in 1917. The first phase was called the February Revolution. During this time, a provisional government succeeded the monarchy in the wake of Tsar Nicholas II's abdication of the imperial throne. Political turmoil quickly engulfed Russian society, and during the second phase, called the October Revolution, the extremely radical faction of the broader Russian Socialist Party, known as the Bolsheviks, took control of the government through organized insurrections from within ministerial and military positions. The Bolshevists sought to completely deconstruct the whole of Russian civilization and rebuild it in accordance with the ideological principles of the philosopher and economist Karl Marx in order to create a communist society. Their principal leader at this time was Vladimir Lenin, who would be the first head of government for the Soviet Russia. Lenin was also the originator of the political philosophy called Marxist-Leninism, which was the essential foundation of all Bolshevist thought and action. Another important Bolshevist leader of this period was Leon Trotsky, who was one of the primary architects of the October Revolution and the head commander of the Red military forces during the Russian Civil War. The Bolshevist Reds were opposed by the White movement. The White movement was not as ideologically unified as the Bolshevists, but they were united in their staunch anti-communism. The White movement was not centralized, though they did have prominent leaders at different stages of the Civil War. The principal white leader at the beginning of the war was Admiral Alexander Kolchak, who held the title of Supreme Ruler. His seat of power was in Siberia, and he operated in eastern Russia. The White Army that operated in the south was predominantly led by General Anton Denikin. But after he failed to retake the city of Moscow from the Reds, the White Russian armed forces and government were reorganized and led by Piotr Rangel. Rangel operated out of the city of Sevastopol in Crimea as both the leader of the army and de facto head of state for the government of South Russia until the final evacuation of the White Russians in 1920. Always with Honor can be broadly described as covering Rangel's experience with revolutionary Russia as a witness to the societal destruction brought by the Bolshevists and his role in the infighting against them as a military leader and as a statesman. Though the English translation of the book is itself translated from a French edition, none of the authentic elements of Rangel's personality are lost, nor will the reader find gaps in details or descriptions that are muddled in the translated language. Rangel's writing is not overly ornamented with flowery prose. His descriptions of campaigns and battles are vivid enough to be highly engaging, but they will not exhaust the reader's mind with endless little details. Readers who have absolutely no familiarity with military terminology may be at somewhat of a loss at first, but in time they can sort themselves out as Rangel consistently uses straightforward and clear language. A distinguishing characteristic of Always with Honor is that Rangel includes exact descriptions of letters, speeches, and military dispatches throughout the book as they become relevant in the sequence of events. For the historian, this is a wonderful collection of primary sources, but it will further stimulate the reader of any temperament as it peppers Rangel's memoirs with voices that are not always his own. The result is a more comprehensive narrative than if he had merely paraphrased or sparingly quoted from these documents. There is no shortage of thrilling material as Rangel recounts epic campaigns, soldiers dedicated to the desperate defense of their homeland, and international political intrigue. But when Always with Honor is taken holistically, it transcends the limits of regular historical literature and becomes an instrument that communicates timeless truths about manhood and perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity. Rangel distinguishes himself from other white movement leaders by his uncompromising dedication to right conduct as both a military and political leader. His character is a veritable portrait of virtues that are worthy of contemplation for the Christian. Rangel's display of fortitude is evident in his reflections on taking control of the white movement in its most desperate hour. While I fully understood the weight of responsibility that I was taking on, while I knew the difficulties in the grim conditions of continuing the struggle, I judged I could not decline the post. I could not promise the army victory. All I could do was to promise it should come out of an almost hopeless position without loss of honor. Page 281. Rangel's story reveals a man who made the most critical decisions of his life based upon higher ideals relating to the demands of honor and justice, despite any personal hazard. Piotr Rangel beheld the country's government decay and ultimate collapse. He details the persecutions perpetuated by the Bolshevik regime, the hardships of wartime leadership, and the strain upon human heart in fighting a losing battle. But through it all, Rangel did not let himself be deterred from fulfilling what he held to be his duty for his country. Indeed, Rangel makes repeated references to the cross on Calvary as the source of resolve to persevere to the bitter end. What is more, though, is that this spirit of fortitude bore impressive fruit. Rangel inherited a highly unfavorable position, yet he accomplished stunning victories, both as a military commander and as a statesman. Though he was opposed by a vastly superior force, Rangel took his Russian National Army on the offensive and brought his soldiers to prodigious victories against the Red Army. When faced with austere conditions and political turmoil within the territory under his administration, Rangel never lost sight of his ultimate mission, the national restoration of Russia. Thus he managed the various political factions within his government and put forward policies that won him the support of the common Russian people, particularly the agrarian peasantry. A constant strain in Rangel's character is his sense of fortitude, the ability to weather all storms for the sake of duty. This is but a sample of the virtues that can be meditated upon from reading Always with Honor. The book provides a venerable gallery of other personalities that exhibit the same qualities of dedication and fortitude. From the unshakable devotion of Rangel's wife to the soldiers under his command, to Russian civilians that are mentioned as they become relevant to the events at hand, the reader is exposed to many examples of high virtues that cannot fail to inspire feelings of admiration. Rangel's candidness with his Christian faith makes it clear that his understanding of forbearance and suffering helped to frame his worldview. This book could be written about for much longer and analyzed in great detail, but for now it is enough to say that Always with Honor is indeed a classic, and the story of Piotr Rangel and the White Army deserves to be remembered, for they have much to tell us.